Hello, bookworms, and welcome back. Welcome to 2020. It's been it was an interesting past year. Um, so last year was actually an extremely productive year for me. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that by telling you an update on my how my goals went last year and what my top three books were and my bottom three books were. So first, I am very proud of myself. My goal last year was to read 24 books in 2019. I actually ended up reading 28 books in 2019 and a total of 8,399 pages. So I'm pretty proud about that. And out of all of those 28 books, there are three books that I felt were like the best of the best, and I really, really loved them. And there were three books that were kind of just a waste of time. So let's get started in on the top three. So, um, so for my top three, in I guess third place would be The Lost Girls of Paris by Pam Jenoff. So I already did a review about this book and why I loved it and why I didn't like it. And I'll go ahead and leave a review of that book in the comments below. But basically, it's a book that took place. It was a random buy from Costco, and it took the place of Girl Interrupted. Originally, Girl Interrupted was my original third choice, but I really liked this book because I feel like my interest over the year has shifted from mental disorders to historical fiction, which I never thought I would like. I've always had this interest in mental disorders, but I never thought I would even enjoy historical fiction. The Lost Girls of Paris primarily revolves around three girls. For those of you who don't know about this book, it revolves around Grace, who is a social worker's assistant. She finds a mysterious suitcase that contains dozens of different photographs of different women. And with the help of her deceased husband's best friend and her lover Mark, Grace is pulled down this mystery of who these women are. And and then there's another point of view, which is Eleanor Triggs, who is the secretary to the commander and of the female branch of the Special Operations Executive. And then there's Mary Rowe, who her and about a dozen other women are trained to be secret agents in France. It is a fantastic book. I really, really loved it. I loved the passion that was put into the novel, and it was about Paris. I mean, I love anything about France, so it was a really this book changed my perspective about a whole genre, so this had to make the list. um my second favorite book of the year, to probably no one's surprise, is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. Harry Potter is my all-time favorite book series. I'm literally wearing one right now. It's Luna, because Luna's awesome. Um, and so, and this is my favorite book of the series. It's an emotional roller coaster, and in the third book is where Harry's pursued by this notorious mass murderer, Sirius Black. And it's my favorite book because Harry finally gets a parent. He finally gets this parental figure that you've been rooting for and hoping that Harry would find this entire time. Um, and I think my all-time favorite book of this year, which is a little surprising, is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgkin Burnett. This book was actually on my 100 Essential Books to Read list, and I frankly couldn't see anything wrong with this book. It's about this little girl named Mary Leno whose parents dies due to an illness in India, and so she's forced to move in with her uncle Archibald Craven in Yorkshire. And this little girl is really spoiled. She's really like snobby. She doesn't really know how to interact with other people. Um, and throughout the book, she learns about the healing power of nature and sharing that healing power with those around her. And it's completely changed my view about nature itself and amplified my own connection that I already have with nature. So it was a fantastic book, and it's one of those books that I still think about, and which is why it's probably like my favorite book this year. Um, there's also quite a few books. So those were the good ones. It was really hard to pick which three were my favorite. But it wasn't very hard to pick which three were my least favorite, to be honest. So for my bottom three, I think I'm gonna go from least best to worse. Is that how you do that? So my favorite of my least favorites was Black Beauty. I read this because it was part of my Goodreads book club, and this position changed. I changed this from Lucifer Coldhaven by Holly Black to Black Beauty, just because at least Lucifer Coldhaven, even though it was a comic book, it was also still entertaining. Like, I knew what it was. It was kind of like, meh, it was a comic book. But Black Beauty was supposed to be like this classic novel that people actually enjoy, and honestly, I didn't. I felt that it was boring and that it was childish and that there might be a moral there somewhere, but I couldn't really find it. So yeah, I never finished that book, and honestly, if I never finish it, probably means it's not that great, because I finished most of my books. The second of my least favorite books was Antigone by Sophocles. It was another book that was on my 100 Essential Books to Read in Your Lifetime. And it's about this girl, Antigone, who is on trial for burying her brother, whom King Creson had decreed that he was not allowed to be buried because he was on the other side of the war, and he wasn't to be buried or mourned upon, and the penalty of that is stoning. And Antigone, who's his sister, was caught burying her brother. And so Creon's orders, Antigone was to be buried in a tomb and to be left there to die. And the king ends up changing his mind, but not before, Antigone commits suicide, and then it's just a downhill spiral from there. It was a good story of the time, I'm sure. But the moral of the story doesn't quite stand the test of time. I don't think that it wasn't really very relevant to me. I feel like everybody knows that the dead should be mourned and buried. I'm sure that was something that was definitely I know that was an issue during this time, and I understand the moral that it had at this time, but I didn't gain anything out of it. And I think, drum roll please, that the absolute worst book that I read this year, I didn't even finish. It was that bad. Was Save the Date by Morgan Matson. In my defense, I made it to page 207 out of 474. So I made it about halfway through before I finally said I give up. This book was part of the Goodreads book club, and honestly, it's the worst book that I read this year. It's about this girl who's like trying to find a date for her sister's wedding, and it's just, and there's this guy that she's previously had like relations with in the past, like I think they kissed or something, and she like sees him again. Honestly, it was just, it was predictable, it was annoying, and it was just a typical contemporary with needless drama and romantic tension. Actually, let me reenact that statement. It's not a typical contemporary, because contemporaries can be absolutely fantastic, but it, this book was just drama. And I know maybe love stories can be drama, and I'm just not a huge romantic reader, but of the romance books that I have read, this this isn't good. This isn't a good one. So yeah, these were my favorite books of this year and my least favorite books of this year. Um, but it's been a really good year so far, and I'm really excited to see what books this year brings. Anyways, yeah, so feel free to leave me a comment in the description below. What were your favorite books this year, and what were your least favorite books this year? If you can't think of three, what was your favorite book and what was your least favorite book and why? Anyways, I will keep you updated on how my reading progress grows, and I hope to see you soon. All right, read on!